I teach pottery at a community center in Portland 3 nights a week, and I can usually tell within the first 5 minutes which students are going to stick with it and which ones signed up on a whim after too much wine and a Groupon deal. But when Ezra walked into my Thursday evening beginners class last September, I honestly couldn't read him at all. He was maybe 30, with dark, curly hair that looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, wire-rimmed glasses slightly crooked on his nose, and this expression of determined concentration that made him look like he was about to defuse a bomb rather than learn how to center clay. He took the wheel in the back corner, away from everyone else, and when I did my usual welcome speech about patience and practice, I swear he was taking notes in a little leather journal. The thing is, I've been teaching pottery for 6 years, and I've seen people struggle. I've seen retirees who couldn't quite get their hands to cooperate anymore. Teenagers who got frustrated when their bowl didn't look Instagram perfect after 10 minutes. Nervous first daters who were too distracted by each other to focus. But I had never seen anyone as catastrophically bad at pottery as Ezra. That first night, he managed to collapse 3 separate attempts at a simple pinch pot. Not just mess them up, completely obliterate them. The clay would be going fine, and then suddenly it was everywhere. Sliding off the wheel, splattering onto his apron, somehow ending up in his hair. The other students kept glancing over with a mixture of sympathy and secondhand embarrassment. During the break, an older woman named Patricia whispered to me, asking if maybe he needed special attention or had some kind of motor skill issue. But here's what got me. When class ended and everyone else shuffled out, looking at their lumpy but technically functional bowls with cautious pride, Ezra stayed behind. He was staring at the destroyed remains of his last attempt, clay dried and cracking on the wheel, and I was about to give him the gentle speech I'd perfected over the years. You know, pottery isn't for everyone. Maybe try painting. No shame in exploring different creative outlets. Before I could say anything, he looked up at me with these incredibly earnest brown eyes and said, "Same time next week?" I must have looked surprised because he added, "I know I'm terrible, historically terrible, possibly the worst student you've ever had, but I really want to learn this." Then he smiled, and it was the kind of smile that was so genuinely hopeful that I found myself saying yes before I'd really thought about it. The next week, he destroyed 4 pieces. 4. One of them actually flew off the wheel and hit the wall with a wet slap that made everyone in the class jump. Ezra just sat there, covered in clay, and started laughing. Not embarrassed laughter, but real, deep laughter that made his shoulders shake. "Well," he said, "at least I'm consistent." I should mention that I'm not someone who usually gets personally invested in students. I love teaching, don't get me wrong, but I keep professional distance. I show up, I teach the techniques, I offer encouragement, and I go home to my cat and my own studio work. I'd been in exactly one relationship in the past 3 years, and it had ended badly enough that I'd basically decided to focus on my art and let the universe worry about my love life later. But there was something about Ezra that kept catching my attention. The way he'd bite his lower lip when he was concentrating, how he always arrived exactly 10 minutes early and used that time to practice wedging clay, even though his wedging technique was also, objectively, terrible. The fact that he asked questions, real questions, about the science of firing temperatures and glaze chemistry, even though he couldn't make a functional mug to save his life. Week 3, he managed to create something that was almost bowl-shaped. It was lopsided and the walls were uneven and there was a weird bump on one side, but it was recognizable as an intentional object. The whole class actually applauded. Ezra looked at this lumpy little bowl like it was the greatest artistic achievement in human history. "Can I keep this?" he asked me after class, cradling it carefully in both hands. "Of course," I said. "It's yours, though fair warning, it might not survive the firing process." The walls are pretty uneven. That's okay, he said. Even if it explodes in the kiln, I made it, you know. That counts for something. He was standing close enough that I could smell his soap, something clean and woody, and I realized with an uncomfortable jolt that I'd been looking forward to Thursday nights in a way that had nothing to do with teaching pottery. Week 4, the almost bowl exploded in the kiln. Ezra took the news with surprising grace. Week 5, he made another attempt, and this one survived firing but cracked when he tried to glaze it. Week 6, he knocked over an entire shelf of greenware while reaching for a tool, destroying not just his own work, but pieces belonging to 3 other students. I expected him to quit. I honestly would have understood. But the next week, he showed up with homemade cookies for the students whose work he'd destroyed and a bottle of wine for me, which he nervously said was an apology for being the human embodiment of a pottery disaster. I can't accept this, I said, holding the wine. It's too much. It's a $12 bottle from Trader Joe's, he said, and you've shown the patience of a saint. Please, it's the least I can do. I took the wine. After class, as I was locking up, I found myself turning the bottle over in my hands, reading the label, wondering if there was a way to casually suggest we drink it together without crossing about 17 professional boundaries. By week 8, something shifted. Ezra was still not good at pottery, not by any objective measure, but he'd developed this intense focus that was honestly beautiful to watch. He'd tune out everything else, lean in close to his work, and you could see him processing every tiny movement, every adjustment. His hands were always covered in clay now, stained into the creases of his palms, under his fingernails. Working hands. One night, I was helping him correct his grip, standing behind him, my hands over his, guiding the pressure and angle, and I felt him tense up. Not in a bad way, in a way that made me suddenly hyper-aware of how close we were, how my chest was almost touching his back, how his hair smelled like cedar and something else I couldn't identify. Like this? He asked, and his voice was quieter than usual. Yeah, I managed. Just like that. We stayed like that for probably 10 seconds longer than was strictly necessary for instruction. When I stepped back, my heart was doing something complicated in my chest. After class, he lingered again. He'd been doing this more often, staying late to practice or to help me clean up. This time, as we were washing tools in the big utility sink, he said, "Can I ask you something personal?" My stomach dropped. "Sure." "Why do you teach? I mean, I've seen your work, the pieces you have displayed in the front. You're incredibly talented. You could probably be doing gallery shows, making real money. Why spend your Thursday nights with people like me who can't tell the difference between earthenware and stoneware?" It wasn't the question I'd been bracing for, and I felt myself relax. "I teach because making art alone is lonely," I said, "and because there's something about watching someone discover they can create something with their own hands. That moment when it clicks, when the clay starts to cooperate, when they realize they're actually doing it. That's worth more than gallery shows." He was quiet for a moment, drying a tool with focused attention. "You haven't had that moment with me." "Not yet," I said, "but I'm patient." He looked up at me then, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite name. "Why do you keep believing I can do this?" "Because you keep showing up," I said. "That's the hardest part. Most people quit when things get difficult. You break everything you touch, and you come back anyway. That's not lack of talent, that's courage." I saw his throat move as he swallowed. "I should tell you something," he said. "I didn't sign up for this class because I wanted to learn pottery." My heart started doing that complicated thing again. "No? No. I signed up because I saw you teaching through the window one night when I was walking past, and I thought you were the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. and I couldn't figure out any other way to talk to you that didn't seem creepy or weird. So I signed up for pottery, which in retrospect might have been both creepy and weird anyway. I should have said something professional, should have gently established boundaries, should have done literally anything other than what I did, which was laugh. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep in your chest. You've been coming here for 8 weeks, destroying clay and your own dignity because you wanted to talk to me. He pushed his glasses up his nose, a nervous gesture I'd come to recognize. When you put it that way, it sounds unhinged. It is unhinged, I said. It's possibly the most unhinged thing anyone's ever done for me. So you're horrified. I didn't say that. We looked at each other across the utility sink, hands dripping water, and I made a decision that was probably professionally questionable, but personally inevitable. That wine you gave me, I said. I never opened it. Are you free after next week's class? His smile was like sunrise. I'm free. Week 9 was torture. Good torture, but torture. Every time I had to correct his form, every accidental brush of hands, every moment of eye contact felt charged with this new electricity. The other students definitely noticed something was different, though I don't think they could pinpoint what. That night, Ezra actually managed to make a functional cup. It was small and a little wobbly, and one side was thicker than the other, but it was a cup. An actual recognizable cup that would hold liquid. The class applauded again, and this time Ezra's smile was directed at me, specifically. After everyone left, we sat on the floor of the studio drinking $12 Trader Joe's wine from paper cups, and he told me the real story. He was a software engineer who'd moved to Portland 6 months ago for work, didn't know anyone in the city, had been feeling increasingly isolated and lonely, wondering if he'd made a mistake leaving his hometown. Then one Thursday evening in September, walking past the community center, he'd seen me through the window teaching a class, my hands covered in clay, laughing at something a student said, and he'd felt something shift. It wasn't just that I thought you were attractive, he said, though you are. It was that you looked happy, like genuinely, unselfconsciously happy. And I realized I hadn't felt that way in months, maybe years. And I thought, I want to know what that feels like. I want to be around someone who loves what they do that much. So you signed up for pottery, I said. So I signed up for pottery, and then I turned out to be catastrophically bad at it. And I kept thinking I should quit, but every week I'd come back and you'd be patient with me and kind, and you'd look at my destroyed clay like it was just a temporary setback rather than evidence of my fundamental incompetence. And somewhere around week 4, I realized I wasn't coming back for the pottery anymore. I reached out and took his hand, clay still stained into both our palms. I started looking forward to Thursdays around week 3, I admitted, which was professionally problematic. Only professionally. Personally, it was the best thing that had happened to me in a long time. We sat there on the floor of the pottery studio, surrounded by wheels and tools and bags of clay, drinking cheap wine and talking until the community center janitor came by to lock up and found us still there, laughing about Ezra's greatest pottery disasters. That was 8 months ago. Ezra still comes to my Thursday class, and he's gotten better, though better is relative. He can make a functional bowl now, and his cups only wobble slightly, and he's only destroyed other students' work twice in the past 3 months. He's never going to be a master potter, but that was never really the point. Last week, he made me a mug. It's lopsided, and the handle is attached at a slightly wrong angle, and the glaze dripped more on one side than the other. It's the most beautiful thing I own. I drink my coffee from it every morning, and every time I do, I think about courage, about showing up even when you're bad at something, about the way love sometimes looks like consistently destroyed clay and coming back anyway. He moved in with me last month. My apartment is now full of his catastrophically made pottery, each piece a marker of progress, of persistence, of showing up. We have bowls that list to one side, cups that hold slightly less liquid than they should, a vase that can't actually hold water because he forgot to seal a crack. I love every single piece. Sometimes, late at night, when we're both working in my home studio, me on my wheel and him practicing hand building because he's finally accepted that throwing might never be his strength, I look over at him. At his focused expression, his clay-stained hands, the way he bites his lip when he's concentrating. And I think about that first night, when he walked in looking like he was about to defuse a bomb, and how I had no idea that this terrible pottery student was going to completely rearrange my life. He looked up last night and caught me watching him. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Nothing," I said, "just thinking about how you're the worst pottery student I've ever had." "Historically bad," he agreed, "and how I'm so glad you kept showing up." He put down the coil he was working on and came over to me, leaving clay fingerprints on my shoulder as he kissed me. "Best bad decision I ever made," he said, and standing there in my studio covered in clay, kissing this man who broke everything he touched and kept coming back anyway. I thought about how sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming, how sometimes courage looks like signing up for a class you'll be terrible at, how sometimes love is patient and kind and willing to wait through 8 weeks of destroyed pottery until the right moment arrives. Ezra went back to his coil pot, and I went back to my wheel, and somewhere in the kiln, a new batch of his work was firing, probably unevenly, possibly with air bubbles that would cause problems, but made with hands that are learning, slowly, what it means to create something that lasts. Total char count, 16,847,